This is Princes Street in Edinburgh with a castle above. At midnight on the 31st of January, this is the place to be if you want to experience a real Scottish New Year. Or is it? If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me get some folk to tell you a story. In normal times, people come from all over the world and they'll flock to Edinburgh and pay hard-earned cash to stand here in a public street and watch entertainment from above. The entertainment's manufactured and the price charged excludes people whose council tax pays for the maintenance of Edinburgh. Now, it may be that future generations will see manufactured entertainment and exclusion as being part of a hogmanay, but it was never what a Scottish New Year meant to me. So I'm going to take you to meet some special people to talk about a real Scottish New Year. But first, a quick bit of background. Now you might not realise it, but a Scottish New Year is really all about a Roman Christmas. You see, before the Reformation, Scots would have celebrated Christmas like any other Christian nations of their time. Mary Queen of Scots would have loved a good old Christmas knees up. John Knox, not so much. Christmas was of course an adaptation of pagan midwinter festivals and an abomination to the Presbyterian Church, which ruled with an iron fist in 17th century Scotland. So much so that in 1640 Christmas celebrations were banned. It was against the law to celebrate Christmas. They tell me that later in the decade, Puritans in England also banned Christmas. But this is Scotland History Tours. If you want Johnny-come-lately, fly-by-night, fair weather abhorrers of Christmas, you'll need to go swimming in an English channel. They only played at banning Christmas till Charles II was restored. Here in Scotland, we were more stubborn. Don't get me wrong. Over the years, passing acts of parliaments in Westminster, our English oppressors tried to force Yule logs down our throats, but we weren't taking any shit. No, we just celebrated New Year instead. That's why New Year became a uniquely special celebration in Scotland. My aunts who brought me up told me that they didn't exchange gifts at Christmas, but New Year. On Christmas Day, they went out to work. It wasn't until 1958 that Christmas was even a public holiday in Scotland, and an English Boxing Day holiday wasn't forced on us until 1974. In Scotland, it wasn't the 25th and 26th of December, but the 1st and 2nd of January that were public holidays. As somebody who was born in 1964, I was part of the first generation of Scottish kids to wake up on a Christmas Day holiday to presents at the bottom of the bed. I also remember working for a Scottish insurance company in the 1990s when they announced that the 2nd of January was no longer going to be a holiday closure because we had to be open for our customers in England who didn't have a day off. So I thought I'd take you to the Wee Museum of Memory in Leith to speak to John and Maureen and get some of their recollections of a Scottish New Year. Why don't you tell me about your hogmanay traditions in the comments below? So I've brought you here to the Wee Museum of Memory in Leith. We're surrounded by all sorts of wonderful things from the past here in Scotland. And I've got two wonderful people from the past here in Scotland as well. I've got Maureen and John, right? Now, here's the thing. You work here at the Wee Museum of Memory and you volunteer here as well?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go, right? So you've kind of got a wee handle in the past, right? And I wanted to chat to you about your experiences of Christmas, New Year and stuff like that.
I remember they used to work in the morning on Christmas Day.
Aye.
You know, they finished up at lunchtime,
Aye.
as we would call it. The dinner hour, you know.
Aye. Well, I would
finish
call it dinner time.
Dinner
You
time.
must have been posh. If you called it lunchtime.
No, that's not. Then it was your dinner and your tea.
It was known as dinner time.
Dinner time.
Aye.
I keep saying to my wife, well, what you want for tea tonight?
Aye.
And she'll say, it's not tea, it's dinner.
Oh, so your wife is posh, is she?
Well, I think she thinks it's.
Aye, aye. No, it was a your tea, wasn't it?
Yes,
It was a your
it was
tea.
She always says, it's not tea, it's dinner.
Aye, aye. What are your memories of?
Well, just when we were young, we were allowed to stay up
Aye.
till maybe 1 o'clock, and you got a piece of black bun or a piece of cherry cake and a black currant cordial.
Oh right, aye, aye.
That was your tipple.
I remember getting ginger beer, not ginger beer, ginger wine.
Ginger wine.
And it was awful. It was like, as a bairn, it was like this
Aye.
hot, kind of spicy.
Well, the black currant cordial, I never liked it, but that's all there was.
Aye, aye. So did you not get ginger wine then?
No.
Does that make me posh?
Oh, that makes you posh.
Is it? Oh.
It'd probably be a Krabby's green ginger.
Aye, that would be what you would get.
No,
You know,
I
no.
think it would. I think it would have been homemade.
Oh,
I get the feeling that it was a homemade thing. That somebody now I might be wrong there. I might be wrong, but that was always that's my kind of sense that somebody's made this ginger wine, and you know it was at Christmas time, at New Year time that it came out, and that was your kind of. And as I say, I was brought up by my aunts. They weren't big drinkers. They might have a sherry.
That's
Uh,
right.
That was
New
a
Year.
favourite thing at New Year.
Yeah.
Toast with a sherry. There wasn't
With
such
sherry
thing
and a
as, like,
whiskey, aye.
big gin and tonics. There was nothing like that.
None of your
Sherry or a
fancy
beer.
cocktails.
Sherry or beer, not even wine. You know, it's just
But back in were sherry or whiskey your two options?
that was it. Yeah,
Whiskey
or
if you were a
can-
bloke.
That was
or
what
a
you
bottle of
bought.
beer.
Or a bottle of beer or whiskey if you were a bloke, sherry if you're a woman. Is that?
That was it. There was no martinis or St. John was like the stuff up there. Nothing like that when we were wee.
Did you ever have a whiskey yourself, Maureen?
Yes.
Or did your ma have a whiskey? Did she take
Aye.
a?
That was the only time there was drink in the house was Hogmanay, you know, for New Year.
Aye.
And it was usually a bottle of sherry and a bottle of whiskey and screw tops, as they would call it.
Yeah.
Because as you got a wee bit older, as a child, you made a lot of pocket money taking all these screw tops back to the pubs.
Oh right, aye. The bottles.
Yeah.
Aye,
My granny used to have a go-car that she used, which was a pushchair
aye.
for the wash house.
Right, aye.
So I used to get all the screw tops for my aunties and any of the neighbours and load them up, and I knew whatever pubs
Would take
to
which.
take them back.
Aye.
I think
So
you got a penny each for them.
you
or
made
something.
quite a bit
And
of
so
money.
that was how you started off rich at the start of the year, and you spent your money as the year. I bet your money was gone by the end of February. Eh?
The biggest thing for me New Year, we stayed in a house in Royston, in a 4 in a block, and I'd be maybe 7 or 8 at the time, and the guy next door, they stayed in the house. They didn't have no electricity. It was candles, and they cooked all their food on the fire.
Wow.
But the old
What
man,
year would that be?
what was it? 57. About 1957.
1957.
And just because they were gypsies or all. So the old guy, Royston Mains Crescent was about 3/4 of a mile long. So the old guy would get you say located out about 20 to 12 bagpipes way along the other end of Royston Mains Crescent. As soon as it hit 12 o'clock, they started playing the
He would
pipes.
start playing the
So he
pipes.
was coming along and everybody was coming out. Happy New Year, giving him a dram. So
Oh,
as he
right.
got nearer and nearer to the house, there was no tune, there was just a bell.
Aye.
Brilliant.
And he did that
our-
every year.
That was our
Aye.
New
Till I
Year.
can remember, 14, 15-year-old.
Aye. Very good. So would he be? Well, he didn't go into any houses.
No, the people used to come out
Come on.
Aye.
and
Right.
say
Okay.
Happy New Year and
Right.
give him a dram. As I say, the nearer they got to the house, it was
Yeah.
the noise, you know.
But because the thing that I remember first footing. Do you know what I mean? Which folk didn't do the same now, eh?
It doesn't
Too
keep it.
widespread now. You know, when you think your circle of friends and family was quite neat,
Aye.
really, years
Aye.
ago.
Folk
weren't
were in
they?
the same
Aha.
village or town or
That's
whatever.
right.
Aye.
You know,
But
in Leith everybody was together.
aye.
It's only once they started getting put out to the new house in the States that it became.
It was a bit like Royston, it was a community.
Aye.
You know, everybody, not at the far end, but our end, if you like, everybody knew everybody.
Aye.
So you went in and out of each other's houses.
Aye.
would sit with their kids, you know, while they were having that conversation they had and a wee drink. We would have a cordial and play with their children. You know. And then, but we never got to stay up too late. I think 1 o'clock was the deadline, right?
Oh, is that right?
For the kids, no for the
Aye.
bed, 1 o'clock, and that's it. You know.
Aye.
You know, you'd hear the music or them all singing.
That's right.
And you're in your bed singing.
It's like you're in the jail. What did I do?
It's always one of my aunts. She used to smuggle in, maybe later on, maybe she knew we were awake. Could just wait for the noise. But she would come in with a bit of shortbread or a bit of black bun and a wee juice for us, you know.
Aye.
And don't tell your mum, you know.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I thought you were going to see she would smuggle in coke and hash.
No, didn't know what that was.
Wouldn't have known what that was. Not even Coca-Cola then.
A bit of black bun or that. Now, here's the thing, right? Because it was my daughter will be about 24. She was away a year or two ago, staying at her boyfriend's, the dirty hussy, right, for New Year. And I said to her, right, she was going to, I said, you better take some coal, because we've got a coal fire. You better take some coal and some shortbread with you. And when I didn't care where they went, some of their pals, all that age. And when she went to the house and brought out coal and shortbread, they were like, what's that?
What's that?
I was kind of heartbroken by that.
That tradition is
because she
gone.
was trying to be traditional.
Aye.
They didn't know what it was about.
So talk to us about First Foot.
Well, as I'd said to you earlier, when I was young, I used to think how unfair it was that on Hogmanay, how hard a woman worked. The whole house had to be cleaned. All the washing had to be up to date, all ironed, all away. The fancy tablecloth got put on the table. You know, all that. The men would go to the pub shut at 10 o'clock.
That's right.
I used to think then, you know.
My mum was exactly the same.
That's
Everything had to be spot on. She even made pots of soup.
Oh, everything. It was a
Stuff like
meal.
that.
It was a meal.
But
A pot of soup
You're right, the
and
men
an
went-
ox tongue.
the men went to the pub.
Oh, I can't remember the last time I had ox. I hated that ox tongue.
Ox
We
tongue.
used to have it on a Sunday. My auntie would often make it on a Sunday, and I couldn't go it.
Well, I suppose it was the cheapest way.
That was the
Buying
cheapest way
sliced
then, 'cause
cold meat
nobody
was
could afford. We were quite fortunate at like New Year's Day, New Year. My granddad was a butcher, so we always had, and even to this day, now that we sort of kept up some traditions, we always had a steak pie on New Year's Day, and we still have that.
Aye, we have a steak pie New Year's Day. Do you have a steak pie New Year's Day?
Yes.
Aye, there you go.
Anderson's the butchers.
Was that all right? I didn't ken where. I'll be honest. We probably just go down the supermarket
And
but-
get it, that's right.
Aye.
So, yes, when I was young, I thought how unfair that was. The first Hogmanay we got to go out, my friends and I, we were 17. Were we 16 or 17? We went to the Pally. The Pally
hall at
in Fountain Bridge
All
was the
right,
dancing.
okay. All right, okay.
But my mother had gave me a wee bottle
Oh, did she?
because that was our supposed to be our Hogmanay
Aye.
bottle. So my friend and I got a wee bottle,
Aye.
and it was
You didn't go daft, did you?
well. When we went into the dancing, the cloakroom took all your bottles off you.
That's right. You weren't allowed
You
to.
checked them in.
Right. Is that so that they could sell you drink, or
Oh no, there was no
No,
ice.
there
Was there no drink?
In the dance halls, when I was going to dance halls, 17, 18, all you could get was Coca-Cola and coffee. Nothing.
is that right?
Oh yes.
Oh, it's unheard of.
Aye, well, I used to go. I used to go Hogmanay. We went to Magoo's, and then we would go for there. 12:45, up to the Tron Church. There was no the big gardens like there is in Princess Street now. Everybody met up the bridges at the Tron Church, and it was just bells. Happy New Year, and if you're lucky, you got to sell a bird.
Aye, I can.
That would take you to a party.
Aye, there we go. I'll need to find, I'll maybe put it up on this thing, of a picture of me at the Tron with some friends. The only time I had a New Year in Edinburgh, and we went up to the Tron, we were students and that, like, you know what I mean? And I'll maybe stick a picture up there. But I remember, I've experienced an Edinburgh
nobody,
Christmas.
I mean, even to this day, my wife and I were talking about nobody knew the significance of meeting at the Tron. You know, what was it for? Was it just, you know, we didn't know what it was. Just everybody met there.
It was a tradition that had built
That's
up
right, a
years
tradition.
ago. And
Yes,
And
my
then,
mother
as I
done
say,
it.
we would go
you know.
for there, if you're lucky to get, as we called it, a bag off.
a bag off, what's
Aye.
it? A lumber?
Aye, same thing.
Ah, right, okay,
We
right,
would go
okay,
to
aye.
a party with them, or we'd be taking them somewhere, you know, to a party, that kind of thing.
Ah, very good.
And
Oh,
then later on-
he's a bit of a Casanova, our John.
Later
eh?
on, when I met my wife, we got married in the 70s. But before we got married, her mum and dad were really traditionalists. Everything New Year, spotless, rest of food. She used to give you a 3-course meal at 12 o'clock at night.
Is that
When
right?
the bells went off.
Well, when the men come in for the pub,
Aye.
my mother
then-
always made sure they had something to eat
Aye.
because they were then waiting till the bells.
Aye,
But my mother-in-law used to put me out the door at 10 to 12,
aye,
stand at the bottom of the stair, and we are a bit cold and a half bottle.
aye.
And as soon as the bells went, I was the first fruit. I wasn't tall, dark and handsome, I was wee, fat and ugly.
We were the best of the
Oh, can you imagine what the rest of the troglodytes must have looked like? Eh?
We,
So that's the point, is that we had this tradition, didn't we, that the first person across your door at New Year
Bring you luck.
brought you luck.
Well, never had any.
and that was the drink, so that you always had,
You always had something to drink.
Oh,
you always had
something
something to eat and heat.
That's so shortbread, coal, and whiskey. That's
Well,
what I got.
even when we first got married, my wife and I kept up the tradition, and it just died away on its own. We'd have all the neighbours in, or we would go to them. But it just sort of...
It's
No,
a
you're
shame,
lucky.
eh?
I
It's
know.
heartbreaking.
When
actually.
we were young, you would wait for the bells, but the tradition used to be to open your window, open your door, because you let the new spirit in and the old spirit out.
Aye.
And you knew it was 12 o'clock because all the boats in the docks
I would.
Right off there.
would sound their horns.
Aye.
All you know, you heard all the different horns for the
Aye.
docks. And my granny's last job, just before the bells, she had to take the old ash out the fire and get it out the house.
Right, to get
Yes.
all the old.
year out.
That was
Aye.
everything out.
Aye.
And our usual first fit was my uncle stayed down at the docks here, just along the road. And like John says about a neighbour, he would get out his accordion and they would walk from Dock Place right
This is
up
a long,
Sampert Street, across the bridge, right along Tobith Wynd, and people would come out because he's playing the whole way.
Yeah.
He's playing. You know, Happy New Year.
And they would follow like Pied Piper.
He would stop by, play, they would all have a wee dance, a wee drink, until he eventually got to us in the kirk.
He couldn't play.
Until he got to us in the kirk.
I see, that's the beautiful thing. And to me, that, like, Hogmanay it wasn't a manufactured, and
No,
it was a
happened.
community type thing. And I mind, I said that my aunties were kind of old enough to be my grannies. And I mind they would send us, like, across the town to go and your Auntie Maisie, right now there's a box of biscuits on New Year's Day. Now you go across to your Auntie Maisie's, take that box of biscuits. Now you sit with her now. Can I mean? Didn't just go and deliver the biscuit.
No.
You sit with her.
Aye.
Make a bit conversation.
Aye.
yeah.
Can't
we,
mean-
we were like that too.
Yes.
Go to Granny and
That
Granddad and
was-
just talk to them. And
Aye.
That was usually the New Year with us, you know.
Aye, that's what I'm saying, aye.
Once all the redevelopment started in Leith and people were getting put out to Royston, you know, I can remember when I maybe had an auntie in one stair, an uncle across the road, my gran. We were all close
Aye, aye.
and your neighbours. So that was Hogmanay. That
Aye.
was on the bells, was all the folk that stayed round you.
Aye.
Once the different aunties and uncles started moving out to Royston, Mains and Granton and so on, that was the 1st of January. they would come
Aye,
in
aye,
then
aye.
to their mother,
Aye.
you know, and that would always be, you know, making up plates of sandwiches for this one, for that one, for the next, you know, was the 1st of January.
Aye.
And then you spoke about the 2nd. One of my granny's daughters was born on the 2nd. So the 2nd was usually always a party at hers for her birthday, you know.
I worked in a brewery at Fountain Bridge. I was there for 30 years. And my job was to look after the beer while it's fermenting and maturing. So sometimes I had to work on Hogmanay or New Year's Day. Or
No, but the thing is, making beer's like an essential industry, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So you have to, I mean, even during the COVID, the folk, you have to make the beer like.
We were covered 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Aye.
If it wasn't your turn, it'd be somebody else's.
Aye. But because I mind, see when New Year fell on a Saturday, and the 2nd's on a Sunday, and then you have to get your replacement days off on the Monday, Tuesday.
That's right.
And it was like a 4-day party.
I remember that.
It was
That's
just
right, yeah.
rolling from place to
Through
place
all
to
of it.
place to place, eh? But now, and this is the thing, because now up in Edinburgh, right, up in the tune, because I can't remember who mentioned Princess Street, right? Was it you? And I mind going up to the Throne, and I remember the first year they did this thing, and my mate in Edinburgh that I'd come down to visit for that thing, he was raging because they're closing off Princess Street, and you've got to pay
That's
To
right.
get
to
in.
get in.
You
to
got your
Princess-
arm,
You needed
your
a ticket.
wristbands.
To get in.
Aye, and you paid your rates and all.
But had there not been an accident at the Tron?
Is
I
that
think there'd been an accident one year because it started to get too big, too congested.
right?
And I think something happened to somebody, it fell and more or less got trampled, whatever, I can't remember exactly. And then they started looking at the possibility of moving it.
But now it's this huge thing, isn't it?
It's too big now.
It's too big. And this is the thing that strikes me, is we sell to the world, come to Edinburgh for a Scottish Hogmanay, and what we're giving them is nothing,
Nothing like
like
a Scottish Hogmanay. I mean, Hogmanay for us would be
Andy
like,
Stewart.
It would be Andy Stewart.
Andy Stewart and the
Ricky
telly,
Fulton,
all the old,
all the old
Scotch and
Francie
Rye.
yes,
Josie,
the
White
dancers,
Heather Club,
the,
and
yes,
that was us.
Aye. And it was,
And-
but it
and
was
the
also,
TV
it struck me as it was a much more personal community type thing, rather than the manufactured kind of.
you had to have your party piece, of course.
Aye.
You got up and
You know.
sung or read a poem.
And you can still, I can still think of my different aunties and uncles. If a song comes on now, I think, oh,
Aye.
Granny used to sing that.
I'm a bit- I'm a
My
bit
auntie
like that
sung
myself.
that.
But that's the thing, and I suppose when you created your own entertainment rather than this
Did,
manufactured
that's
thing in
right.
Princess Street, of course you had to have a party piece to
Oh,
do.
yes.
Aye.
It was always-
Whatever age,
we
and
had-
the
it was-
children were included, they had to be able to do
That's
something.
right. As I say, we had the
well.
guy next door with the pipes, and the guy across the road played the Ruthie, so there was always something going on.
Yeah, aye. And it was all a community and a renewal, and you start the year with good intentions and money in your pocket for collecting the bottles.
And you make resolutions that you didn't keep.
Aye.
New Year's
Oh,
resolution.
aye. But it's part and parcel. But anyway, so listen, it's been a delight to talk to John and Maureen here. Why don't you in the comment section tell me about your experiences? What do you do at New Year? And there'll also be another video all about Scottish history and culture coming up on screen now. In the meantime, Hammy and Dawkins can be Lama alive. Cheery and Drasta.